what people are potentially going to get really stung by in Canada is we've been taught this idea that real estate only goes up and you can never lose with real estate, which is just absolutely not true. And it has been true in Canada for long enough that everybody thinks that this is some kind of like, asset class that doesn't, the laws of gravity don't apply to it. And that, so this is a correction and then it's going to continue to go up again. But that's not a given. It's certainly not a guarantee. As a Bitcoin believer, what I think most people who don't understand Bitcoin don't understand is I don't really believe that we will 10 or 20 years from now conceptualize physical things as stores of value the way we have over the last 70 years. Because the reason we did that, in part, is because something like Bitcoin didn't exist. What we'll see over the next 10 years if this proves to be true, but I think that companies that embrace Bitcoin as part of their culture will be, they can't help but start thinking differently. They're going to be thinking long term. And, businesses used to really thrive by having like a long horizon decision making. And I think part of the fiat problem is that as money becomes less valuable and as the rate that it becomes less valuable accelerates, we're forced into shorter and shorter time frame thinking. And this is true for businesses too. You're just constantly on this treadmill and the treadmill is speeding up forever. So I think that companies that start embracing Bitcoin are going to have a real competitive advantage in their like decision-making group because people will understand something that is different, and like treasury is just one thing. Paying employees is just one thing. Like Bitcoin actually can really transform a business inside and out.
It's starting to look like this Bitcoin thing is here to stay.
Welcome to the Why Bitcoin Wins podcast, brought to you by Beaver Bitcoin. BeaverBitcoin.com is the easiest place to buy Bitcoin in Canada, whether you're buying Bitcoin for yourself or starting a Bitcoin treasury for your business. Feel free to go to BeaverBitcoin.com and contact Beaver to help you with buying Bitcoin if you're in Canada. I am your host of the Why Bitcoin Wins podcast, Shravan Jhangiani, and today's guest is Scott Dedels. Scott is the co-founder and co-CEO of Block Rewards, a company focused on bringing Bitcoin into the workplace through compensation, benefits, and long-term savings programs. Scott comes at Bitcoin from a very practical angle, not price, not hype, but incentives. How people earn, how they save, how companies think about compensation, and how sound money can quietly shape behavior over decades. Scott, welcome to Why Bitcoin Wins.
Thanks for having me on. I'm happy to be here.
Scott, we met at the Montreal conference and you gave me this awesome hat, which I am going to wear.
Looks great on you.
For this podcast. So I'm ready to go. And the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to ask you a few questions. And then you can you can go into them as much or as little as you want. And we'll just let the conversation flow from there. Sounds good? Okay, sweet. So, this show is called the Why Bitcoin Wins podcast. And we really like to understand why our guests think Bitcoin wins. And the best place to do that, I find, is digging into your entry point. What got you into Bitcoin? So let's start right at the beginning. What pulled you into Bitcoin? And then how did that lead to you eventually starting Block Rewards?
This all started for me in 2020. Like a lot of people, I think the class of 2020 was a bigger than normal class. I had spent the most of my career, kind of 15 plus years, working in benefits and pensions. So I came from the world of benefits and compensation, and was managing a number of pensions in 2020 when the country went into lockdown. And so I had a traditional finance background. I had taken all the courses. I had been, you know, educating people on like retirement strategies for most of my career, and thought I knew a lot about money. And I became concerned about inflation a few weeks into the pandemic when it started to become obvious that the federal government was going to pay everyone to keep the country closed down. So we were paying businesses so that they could cover their rent costs. We were paying employees so that they could stay home. It was really an unprecedented degree of intervention by the government, and a volume of the creation of money like we really hadn't seen. And so yeah, I just didn't understand how this was all going to work and leave the value of our dollar intact. So I actually wasn't interested in Bitcoin. I got interested in economics and started reading. That was when I first actually started reading Austrian stuff. Rothbard and Mises, and learning that there really isn't another opinion that it wouldn't work. And obviously in hindsight it didn't, and we are experiencing a crisis in the cost of living in Canada now, and food prices are skyrocketing, and ordinary people are really having a tough time making sense. I started reading economics textbooks. Amazon eventually recommended me Jeff Booth's book, The Price of Tomorrow, which is one of my favorite books to recommend. It's not really a Bitcoin book. It's more of a technology book that talks about inflation and deflation, and it really made sense to me. I actually read it again. As soon as I read it the first time, I read it immediately a second time. And then I got interested in Bitcoin. Sort of as I started to understand it better, I think this happens to a lot of people. It's a really normal thing to start relating Bitcoin to whatever your personal area of expertise is, Bitcoin applies to everything, right? But so for me, because of what I'd been doing in my work, I immediately started dreaming up different ways that this could be applied, and thinking about how companies recruit and retain staff, and how people are paid, which they are really like, in that world, things really haven't changed in forever, and the fundamental financial relationship between an employee and an employer is fiat. Like we get raises, or we expect to get raises every year, because we understand that inflation is a thing, and we need to make more money to hopefully get ahead, but even just to, keep pace with the rising cost of living. So like everybody understands that without understanding Bitcoin at all. And intuitively Bitcoin, or people who believe in Bitcoin, think that this is a solution to protect yourself from currency debasement. And, as long as that's true, then it makes perfect sense to me that companies over time will start to want to use Bitcoin as a tool to make pay smarter and more effective, and that people in the workforce are going to naturally demand it more. Like over time, if you had an opportunity to earn Bitcoin at work, and you were going to work at one place that offered it and another didn't, like I actually think that we're not too far off into the future where this is going to be like a driving force, or something that really moves the needle for people.
So you went, during the pandemic, you realized that money is being printed out of thin air. And then you, at some point, read Jeff Booth's book, The Price of Tomorrow. And you feel like that's what orange pilled you? What was it about The Price of Tomorrow that made it click? Because inflation itself, technically you could have come to the conclusion that you should just buy stocks, or you should just buy gold, or you should just buy silver, all of which are doing very well right now. Um, what made you feel like, okay, no, it's not those inflation protection mechanisms, if you want to call it that, or real estate or anything else, but Bitcoin specifically is going to be the thing um, that protects my time and energy.
I mean, I think this is where the Price of Tomorrow is so great because it is really a technology book, and it's a book that acknowledges the reality of sort of the digital world that we live in now and are moving more towards. I mean, and I don't think it doesn't work this way. It didn't work this way for me. It wasn't like I instantly understood it. Like I think Bitcoin is, you know, it is for everybody. It's an ongoing deepening of like how well do you get it. And so, after I read Price of Tomorrow, and then I read the Bitcoin Standard, and I read a bunch of other books, the Block Size Wars and Seventh Property by Eric Yakes and the Genesis book. I sort of started like really trying to read stuff. I like to read, but it took me a lot longer. It wasn't just like I read The Price of Tomorrow twice and all of a sudden I was good to go. You have to like really understand the economics. You need to understand the technology. Block Size Wars was important because I think like understanding the history of Bitcoin is really critical. And once people sort of understand the fundamental principles, there are then a lot of obstacles that people have just because they don't understand that these criticisms have already been resolved. And it's just that you don't know about it, and this is like the infinite pizza thing, or, there's always people coming back around thinking that in 2026, they've now, for the first time, thought of some critique of Bitcoin that nobody has thought of over the last 16 or 17 years. And a minimal amount of research will teach you otherwise, but that's not how things go.
So, is there one main catalyst that you feel made it really click for you? Because you obviously mentioned so much study, you spent obviously hundreds, maybe thousands of hours on Bitcoin. So, if you had to dig into your psychology or, um, something that you've experienced in your life due to which it really clicked, is there something that you can identify like that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, what really made it click for me was the collapse of the altcoin Terra Luna.
Oh yeah.
Because when I was that time, like when I got in 2020, was a real, there was a year where kind of everything was going up a lot, and it was like the last bull run was. There were a lot fewer altcoins, and a lot of altcoins went up in dollar terms, like a lot. Terra Luna was like a spectacular one. It started at like $1, went up to like $200. And then in like 24 hours, it went from like billions and billions and billions of market cap to zero. And I owned a bunch of it. And so it was experiencing the permanent loss of the money that I thought I had in this like protocol. It was actually that really got me to like a firsthand personal experience of like how Bitcoin is different. Why is it different? And then actually from there, that was what started me down the road of really wanting to help other people understand like why it's Bitcoin only. Because, I mean,
The actual pain of a shitcoin going to zero,
yeah,
right? That's huge.
yeah. And,
I would
I
do
mean,
it.
so it really is. Bitcoin is this one-time event. It's a really foundational, civilizational technology.
Right.
It is unique, and it's that part of it, I think, is a very difficult thing to understand. And even among people, there are lots of people in crypto who think they get Bitcoin and they have been in it for years and don't understand that.
For sure. Great. Thank you for allowing me to dig into that with you. So, what made you go from, I love Bitcoin to I actually want to build on Bitcoin and created block rewards? How did that happen?
I mean, I just started wanting to get involved, and this is because my background was helping people understand, financial journey and general financial literacy is not great anyways. And so I love helping people with that stuff. And I felt like I had this newfound understanding and this really valuable knowledge to share. But also, like, Bitcoin is a not optional, critical part of how everybody should be thinking about their financial future right now. So I was really excited about the opportunity to apply everything that I had learned in my career and, maybe do something really different and meaningful. And so that was kind of how it all started. I got connected to Bitcoin Well, which is another Canadian Bitcoin company. And I was doing some business development work for them, selling a very early version of what became our sort of core product, Bitcoin Savings Plan. And when the market turned down after the FTX crash, Bitcoin Well kind of went in a different direction, and they were going to discontinue that product.
So this is around end of 2022?
Yeah, into
Okay.
the Q1 of 2023.
Okay.
Yeah. And so after some discussions with Adam O'Brien, who's the CEO at Bitcoin Well, we just came to an agreement, and we took Bitcoin Savings Plan in its early form, and that was kind of the birth of the idea of block rewards.
Very cool story. So why do you feel like, the way people work and earn and save, given block rewards is based on orange billing, based on how you work, how you earn, how you save? So how did you, you know, come up with that, and why do you feel that that's like a great way to orange bill people and get new people into Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just like, all of this like accumulated knowledge I have of understanding all the different programs and incentives and rewards that companies offer now, and really seeing how Bitcoin can improve on that. If you think about what people are really trying to do when they invest money that they've earned, is they're trying to, you kind of have to earn your money twice, right? Like you get paid, you pay tax on it, you have what's left, and then you want to grow some of that, and this is just how people think about it.
Hmm.
But if you instead imagine that you were earning a form of money that potentially becomes more valuable and potentially becomes a lot more valuable over short periods of time, what you're actually doing is like you're supercharging the return on the time that you spend at work, and you're accelerating your ability to, like I always say, like I think Bitcoin is the way people should think about saving for their first home, because if you just think about Bitcoin as a savings technology, which it is, you save in that form of money, and that
Hmm.
as that money becomes
Better,
more
better
valuable,
sound money, right?
yeah, speeds up your it speeds up your other goals, and
Right.
and Bitcoin can speed up any of your financial goals. So
Hmm.
so for people who are trying to just maximize the time that they spend at work, it's a
Hmm.
no-brainer.
Right.
And companies, it's the same thing, right? Companies are trying to create an environment where people want to work hard and be loyal and be productive. And what better way to do that? So in the search of solving that problem, companies do all kinds of stuff now. They offer all kinds of different, things, hoping that people will be excited by them. And they put programs in place that help people invest the money that they've already earned. This is like just a normal part of the way things works. Bitcoin is you know, it is the thing among all other things that you would want to own right now. And I think over the next 5 and 10 and 15 years, that's going to continue to be true.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, as long as people have jobs, like I think that this is just, it's obvious to me that this is going to be something that people get excited about.
For sure, yeah. I have a friend who has been saving in Bitcoin since 2020 and now feels like he has a big enough down payment to buy his first home. But it's a really, what do you think about selling right now and buying a home? I mean, it's, I completely understand that you want to own a home, but, doing it now feels counterintuitive.
Yeah, I mean, I have some strong feelings on the subject. Yeah, if your friend lives in Canada, I think it's a terrible idea. Canadian real
I'll send
estate.
him the link of this podcast.
Yeah, the Canadian real estate, I think, is in for a very serious repricing that is going to harm a lot of people. And it's a result of a lot of different bad policies that came together. Unfortunately, yeah, house prices have become really disconnected from what people are earning. And they're just two forces that are moving in completely opposite directions right now. And so one, I think it's a bad time to be buying in Canada. Two, I think that there's the possibility of, one of the problems that real estate has that Bitcoin does not is the clarity of ownership. And one of the coolest things that Bitcoin offers people who have it is a form of ownership of property that really only Bitcoin can do, because you can prove that you have ownership of Bitcoin when you have the ability to sign a transaction from an address. And no one can take that away from you. Like you really can't confiscate that right. Ownership of property, of physical property, especially in Canada, is really a lot less clear. It is, dependent on government decisions, on your ability to pay property taxes that go up forever. There are a lot of other things that make, I think, owning a home less desirable than owning Bitcoin. I think that that's not a reason to not do it. And people, you can't sleep in your Bitcoin. And for some people, there's a peace of mind that comes with feeling like they own their home, even though the bank owns it until you have paid it off. So yeah, I don't fault anyone for selling Bitcoin ever. I personally would not make that choice, and I do rent for that reason. And I think really with Bitcoin, you're selling Bitcoin right now or not owning Bitcoin right now. It's kind of like Russian roulette. At some point Bitcoin is going to be worth a lot more, like vastly more, and we can't know exactly when. I think people get impatient, wanting that to be now, and I do too. Like I would love the Bitcoin price to be way higher, but at some point, the likelihood of it being a lot higher is, I think, very realistic. And until that happens, if you believe in Bitcoin, you probably want to have as much exposure to it as you can. And
Right, absolutely. It's still 87,000 USD or whatever the price is currently, um, which is an incredible price, right?
mhm.
We are we're having this conversation Jan 21st, 2026. We just spoke about December 2022 when it was 16K, right? So, if you bought that bottom, you've done very well and you've changed your entire life already, right? And so, when people complain about the short-term price, that's just a low time preference thing in my mind. But, I think let's dig in a little more into this hot, controversial take of yours, with, real estate versus Bitcoin, because I think that's a really interesting topic for a lot of Bitcoiners. Some people might look at the real estate market and say, hey, you know, no one is interested in it. Everyone seems to be bearish, and therefore it might actually be a good time to buy. But your take is more high level, which is you don't actually own your real estate. I think I read a stat that a lot of old people end up losing their real estate because they can't afford to pay the property taxes, which is kind of absurd, right? For something that you should technically own. Um, and you mentioned Bitcoin is a bearer asset, and therefore no one can take it away from you as long as you hold it. So I think those are interesting to dig more into. Let's start with, your take on real estate. So, can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, I mean, I also think that people, price, your opinion on price of something is relative, and so like, prices are cheaper than they were 2 years ago. That's true, but that doesn't mean that they're cheap now. And you learn this with altcoins, right? Like you can lose 90% of the value of something like an infinite number of times until it goes all the way to zero. So what I think people should be thinking about when they're considering buying Canadian real estate right now is what happened to the Japanese real estate market in the 90s. And so Japan had a cracking real estate market for 30 years, from the 60s into the 90s, and the economy entered into a collapse that was caused by a number of problems. But it's not identical, but the conditions today here are similar enough. 30 years later in Japan, residential real estate prices are nowhere near what they were in the 90s. And if you get outside of Tokyo, you can get some really incredible properties, like detached single family homes, for like $50,000 or $100,000. So what we really, I think what people are potentially going to get really stung by in Canada is we've been taught this idea that real estate only goes up and you can never lose with real estate, which is just absolutely not true. And it has been true in Canada for long enough that everybody thinks that this is some kind of like, asset class that doesn't, the laws of gravity don't apply to it. And that, so this is a correction and then it's going to continue to go up again. But like, that's not a given. It's certainly not a guarantee. And as a Bitcoin believer, what I think most people who don't understand Bitcoin don't understand is I don't really believe that we will 10 or 20 years from now conceptualize physical things as stores of value the way we have over the last 70 years. Because the reason we did that, in part, is because something like Bitcoin didn't exist. So people were using people were using like real estate as an easy way to make money in Canada because there's an exemption on your principal residence, and so flipping houses became a great way to take on more leverage and make some like tax exempt income, which also that might not continue to be accessible to people in the future. We'll see. But the other one was, it was something that was going up faster than people thought what inflation was. And so, it becomes a self-fulfilling cycle where all of a sudden, people understand it. You can create leverage with real estate when you buy something for $1 million, but you only have to put down $100,000. So that it create an opportunity for people to generate cash flow as landlords and own multiple properties. And it's sort of, as an asset class, you can just see how this thing became really Ponzified. Like people piled into this, when one thing seems to be working, other people try to do the same thing. So the conditions that created that, I think, are over in Canada, because part of how that really started in the late 90s, early 2000s was cheap real estate prices. Like I grew up in Edmonton, and in the early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s in Edmonton, you could get a detached home for like $150,000. So the prices were nominally low, but they were also still low compared to average annual income.
But isn't that also fiat debasement?
It is. But, flash forward 25 years later, and I mean, like, a scenario where houses, triple again over another 20 years, it's just not going to be possible. So even if you think that we are still going to be storing value in physical things, and that prices can go up, even though I think there's a great reason to think that they won't. There is the problem of like, well, who's going to buy all these houses and pay that price?
Right. And so Bitcoin wins versus real estate.
Yeah.
Got it. Cool. Okay. So let's shift gears a little bit and go to block rewards. So practically speaking today, what does Block Rewards actually enable companies to do?
Our the product that we have live right now across Canada is called Bitcoin Savings Plan, and Bitcoin Savings Plan is like a group RSP. It is a savings plan that happens in the workplace. Our customer is the company, and we help them. By putting a benefit where it's Bitcoin encouraged savings through the employer that happens through payroll. So there's a few things that are beneficial here. One, generally people have an easier time investing or saving when it comes as a deduction off of their pay stub. And so this product does that. It happens, it doesn't have to, but most of our customers align Bitcoin purchases with their payroll cycle so that you're getting your Bitcoin on the same day that you get paid. And it can work. It's flexible. The tool has been designed so that companies can offer a Bitcoin savings plan however they might want. It can be a standalone benefit, and we have companies that are, give employees some Bitcoin every 2 weeks without expecting employees to buy any themselves, just as a way, these are scenarios usually where there's an owner or an executive that really understands Bitcoin and wants to get their employees in it or wants to expose them to it, and they might not be willing to with their own money. So that's a really cool opportunity. Bitcoin is a great benefit, and it's as somebody, as like an entrepreneur or an owner, you understand Bitcoin. Helping people understand Bitcoin by giving them some exposure to the price is a really great gift, and I think it will, pay dividends for companies that start to go down that road. And it doesn't have to be a big number. We've got a customer that gives their employees $25 every 2 weeks, and so they're getting $500 a year in Bitcoin or 1,000, and it's just sitting there and growing. And employees also have the ability to buy out of their own sort of like after-tax pay, and so we facilitate that. And so some plans offer like a combination where the employer is giving the employee something, and then the employee is also buying. And then there's the option to like link the two. So the company might say like, we'll do $100. We'll do up to $100 every 2 weeks if you buy the same. So now somebody who's interested in buying Bitcoin is getting $2 for every dollar. And that concept comes from the world of traditional savings plans, where like lots of companies that offer a group RSP, they want to see the employee have their own skin in the game and be contributing to their own future too. So so that's kind of an overview of how it works. And it's custodial. We have a third-party custodian partner, which is Balance, based out of Calgary. And so it's all sort of institutional. It's safe. It's easy to use. You don't need to know anything about Bitcoin. Your employees don't need to know anything about Bitcoin. We help make it as easy as we can.
So, Scott, what's fundamentally broken in the traditional compensation and savings models for employees today that Block Rewards and Bitcoin fixes?
The money.
Right.
I mean, and this is the thing, right? Like when you go to the grocery store and you can't afford to like buy the food that you were eating 6 months ago,
Right.
That's not your employer's fault. But it's a reality. And the unfortunate crunch of it is that companies don't have an unlimited budget to keep raising salaries, to keep pace with the rising cost of living. And so one thing that you can do is start using different money, and you can start trying to earn different money that does not become less valuable all the time. This is the thing about Bitcoin. We can't really know when it's going to become more valuable, but over longer periods of time, that people who've saved in Bitcoin have definitely seen their wealth grow faster than the iceberg is melting. And so this is kind of the thing. I think like Bitcoin is not a get rich overnight thing. It's a tool that people can start to utilize to offset the problem of money becoming less valuable by owning some money that is becoming more valuable. And so, that's really how we solve the problem. If you think about an employer, if they were paying their staff in the same amount of money, but that money was becoming more valuable, that's actually stretching the company's money a lot further. And it's giving the company a better ROI on the same budget. And, and if the number one reason, which it is, the number one reason people leave their employer is pay, then the ability to sort of like create more money out of the same amount of money is really like a magic trick for the company. And it should help them address this problem that's going to, financial stresses. It doesn't just cause people to leave to another employer. It causes people to show up to their jobs and not be very effective because of the stress and anxiety, work, stress-related leaves of absence. All these things relate to financial problems, cause like increase in divorces, and all of these things disrupt the workplace. And so Bitcoin as a substitution, it's like, this is the thing, like Bitcoin can fix so many problems, but fixing the problem between employees and employers, it can definitely do. And what I think is cool about Bitcoin Savings Plan is it can start small, and this is kind of, I think, where it has to. So we really want to work with companies, and they can be small companies, 5 people, they could be 5,000 people. It's the same problem, right? And so what we want to just do is help people understand how Bitcoin addresses this problem, how Bitcoin could be helpful in changing the dynamic in the workplace, in helping people get a handle on the feeling like costs are getting away from them, and help orange pill the masses, right? Like it's, yeah.
Awesome. So, you're pitching block rewards to various companies every day. Who is generally the decision maker for something like this? And what gets them to say yes?
Depends on the size of the company. I think what you find is, if the company has maybe fewer than 50 or 75 employees, it's typically the founder or the owner who's making the call on this stuff. And in those scenarios, most often it's, we're connected to those companies because that person is a Bitcoiner and that person understands why they would want to do this.
Right.
And those are some of the great ones for us because when we get to meet companies where the key decision maker understands Bitcoin, it's a really easy process for us to roll our product out and help them understand how they can use this to make a difference, which is the whole purpose of the company, right? And I think then, as the companies grow in size, they grow in complexity, and the decision making on this stuff starts to look a little bit different. So with bigger companies, we can all of a sudden find ourselves talking to people who are, in charge of compensation. So that might be like finance or CFO, or HR and benefits, and that could be a head of HR, or someone who's managing payroll. There's kind of like there's a few different types of decision makers that we deal with. We think that obviously Bitcoin, regardless of the price, is like really topical thing. It's trendy, and companies, whether they're interested in Bitcoin or not, are really interested in making sure that the money they're already spending on these kinds of programs are generating, a positive reaction from their staff. And we think that Bitcoin is really cool, and that younger people, or that there are segments of the workforce that are going to be really interested and excited about the possibility of stacking sats while they're at work. And, getting, like I said, in a scenario where there's kind of a match savings plan and you're getting extra Bitcoin for Bitcoin that you might have bought anyways. I mean, this is like maybe for some people the most exciting thing their company could offer them.
Mm-hmm. And what do you find is the real value proposition for the business? So what's the real business case for a company to adopt this?
One of them is to be different. So companies really are, commonly are competing with each other over labor and talent. Mm-hmm. And this is how companies decide how much money they want to pay people, and what other stuff that they want to offer. So, Bitcoin is that we're the only company that offers a product like this in Canada. And so by offering a Bitcoin savings plan, you're immediately doing something that is really different. And it is something that, as long as Bitcoin continues to behave the way it has, is going to be really good for your staff. So if you have some conviction and can convince other people to come along, and we have stories like this, customers that have been doing Bitcoin savings plans with us for a couple of years now, and the employees who have participated in that time watched Bitcoin go up from 16,000 to whatever you said it was today, 87,000. And so the money they've had is like quadrupled, and it was higher before, in the fall when the Bitcoin price was higher. So Bitcoin works, and getting in the hands of your employees also works. So it's something that companies can do to be different. And then two, I think, like I was saying early in the conversation, people, companies want to generate goodwill because they want their employees to feel valued. They want them to work hard and they want them to stick around. And as people start to understand what a favor the company has done for them by getting them involved in Bitcoin and not altcoins and not other things that they could have bought instead that haven't been as good, they are gonna be grateful, and they are gonna think twice about quitting, and and that's the spirit of why companies would want to do this. I think it's because it's to be different, but it's also to offer something that's really important and valuable.
Are you finding that companies that generally who adopt this also end up putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet?
Yeah, I think we don't have exact way of knowing what the percentage is, but I think that it's really common, and for me to think about it the other way, and like a good example would be all of these American public companies that are holding Bitcoin in their treasury, and very few of them are offering their staff the ability to earn Bitcoin, as far as I understand. So to me, if you are a decision maker at a company and you understand why your company should be saving in Bitcoin, you should understand that your staff should be doing it too. And so I would love to see the number a lot higher. I think there are a lot of companies that are buying Bitcoin now, and Bitcoin is an incredible corporate asset. But, if you're a decision maker buying Bitcoin for your company, we definitely want to talk to you and show you how Bitcoin savings plan works.
100%. If you're listening and you are a decision maker at a company, reach out to Scott. So, do you find employees actually getting orange pilled and moving their Bitcoin to self custody? Do you hear those stories? Any
Yeah,
interesting stories that have surprised you?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think they happen all the time. Like it's just like it happened for me. I think it's a journey. And like people, it depends on how interested people are in it. So like for me, that also just happened at a time where the country was closed down. So I was just sitting at home every night, and I had lots of time to read because I wasn't busy doing like all my other things. But today people are busy and they don't have a ton of like extra intellectual bandwidth. So the orange pilling of your average employee might take a couple of years, and that's fine. Like that's what we're talking to companies about, is like this is something you're setting in place for the long haul, and you want to build really like low time preference into your workplace, like thinking about people who are approaching savings with a long-term view. And so yeah, that's it. It takes time.
For sure. What do you find from a real world implementation perspective? What happens when you've got the yes for block rewards and now you're actually trying to implement the whole process? Do you find that that is generally a smooth experience, or is there something that's coming up as a hard thing that founders and anyone listening to this should be prepared for before they talk to block rewards or before they implement block rewards product?
We've worked really hard on the implementation process and have tried to make it very easy. So there's two steps to think about, because we have this situation where we deal with the company as the customer, but we also deal with our employees. So For us, setting up a company can be done in a couple of hours. I mean, it typically takes a couple of days because there's some KYB that has to happen where, we need to collect some documentation as fulfilling sort of our, anti-money laundering requirements as part of we're a FinTrack regulated money services business. Once the company is set up, then the employees enroll themselves. And that process takes each employee, 5 to 10 minutes. So overall, we sort of tell people, we can, depending on the level of involvement that they want to see from Block Rewards, and if there's a special request, sometimes we do webinars or education sessions to support the launch of a program. Then that can take some planning, but the actual nuts and bolts of starting a Bitcoin savings plan can be done in a day, or certainly in under a week.
Right. That's awesome. And do you find orange-pilled Bitcoiner employees, if your employee is a Bitcoiner, do you find that leads to a happier employee, a better relationship? Because now you have people who understand things like proof of work.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, the Bitcoin people, understand the real value and value for value. And, I think that there's a really interesting, what we'll see over the next 10 years if this proves to be true. But I think that companies that embrace Bitcoin as part of their culture will be, they can't help but start thinking differently. They're going to be thinking long term. And, businesses used to really thrive by having a long horizon decision making. And I think part of the fiat problem is that as money becomes less valuable and as the rate that it becomes less valuable accelerates, we're forced into shorter and shorter time frame thinking. And this is true for businesses too. You're just constantly on this treadmill, and the treadmill is speeding up forever. So I think that companies that start embracing Bitcoin are going to have a real competitive advantage in their decision-making group, because people will understand something that is different, and treasury is just one thing. Paying employees is just one thing. Bitcoin actually can really transform a business inside and out. And so, and I think that this is where we're going. I don't know how long it's going to take before we're only using Bitcoin as money, but from an examination of all the different processes that happen inside a business and how Bitcoin could be beneficial, I think that, over the next 5 years, 10 for sure, it's just going to start to become normal. That companies are going to start to thinking about using Bitcoin in a lot of different ways, in the same way that companies had to really think about using the internet. So, having email and having a web page are, the two most common ways that a company uses the internet. But you use the internet in all kinds of ways, right? Mobile apps and, all things that exist now that didn't exist when people first started using web pages. McDonald's didn't actually own McDonald's.com in the 90s. They had to buy it. Somebody else bought it first. And today, I think more than 50% of McDonald's sales happen online. So every company is online. Every company is a web company now. In the future, 15 years from now, we are not going to call them Bitcoin companies anymore, because every company will be a Bitcoin company. Every company will be using Bitcoin. Is a critical technology in the stack of the digital world.
Absolutely. Scott, thank you so much. That was the end of my big questions for you. Now we're going to move on to my favorite part of this show, which we just renamed to the lightning round. We were calling it the rapid fire round. And then I had the Bitcoin Nova Stacy on, and when we later posted it, she commented that she loved the lightning round. And I was like, that's obviously the right name for this. The lightning round is a way better name than rapid fire round. So thank you, Stacy, for that comment and giving us the idea of changing the name. So it's now called the lightning round. It's the same rules. I ask you a question and we just need your immediate response. It can be one word, it can be a short sentence, but the main thing is that it just should be quick, lightning, right? So are you ready to go? Okay, awesome. Let's go. What's your favorite Lightning wallet?
Follow Satoshi.
Advice to future Bitcoin builders.
Be patient.
Most underrated Bitcoin company or project.
I'm gonna pick most underrated. There are so many good projects in the space.
Beaver Bitcoin.
Beaver Bitcoin.
No, seriously, let's get your real answer.
I'm gonna say Amboss. Amboss is developing a technology for AI to rebalance Lightning channels. It's really cool.
Awesome. How do you spell that?
AMBOSS.
AMBOSS. Amboss. Okay. One habit that's made you a better founder.
Meditation.
Biggest misconception people have about Bitcoin today.
I think probably the biggest one is still that it's part of crypto.
What's your favorite Bitcoin book?
The Big Print by Lawrence Lepard.
Shout out to Larry, who I would love to interview. Last one. Bitcoin in one word.
Inevitable.
Love it. Thank you, Scott. That's the end of the lightning round. Do you have any closing words, statements you'd like to make to listeners?
Yeah, no, thanks again for having me on. I always love to talk about this. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk about Block Rewards and what we're doing. People can find us at blockrewards.com or my email address is scott@blockrewards.com. And certainly, if anyone's listening and they want to learn more, please reach out. Yeah, and thanks again for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you coming on the Why Bitcoin Wins podcast, and we'd love to have you back anytime.
Anytime.
Okay, I'm going to stop